Now, before we get in to tonight's lecture, let me introduce our presenter, Steve Veach. Originally from Colorado, Steve and his wife moved to Michigan, where he continues to enjoy the outdoors, research, and write about history. Steve volunteers for us at the Historical Society and works in our archives room, scanning photographs and documents into our online catalog, and is our vice president of the board of directors. So if you would, please join me in giving him a warm welcome as he presents Paths of Faith.
Thank you, Matt. Hello, everybody, and welcome. I am sorry I can't stand for half an hour or 45 minutes to talk to you. I hurt my back hauling rocks out of a gold mine in Cripple Creek, Colorado, and then it got worse hauling anchors in the Navy as a storekeeper. So anyway, this all started, what you're going to see this afternoon was an exhibit that the museum put on this summer, and it was called On the Home Front, and it honored people who helped make the world safe for democracy. And this is the story of two young men from Beulah who served in the military, one in the European theater and did not make it back home, and one who served in the Pacific theater and did make it back home. Our first young man is Dexter Warren, and I believe his family will be on Zoom listening to this. I was able to, through research, find his daughter. He never met her. He died in combat, and a few months later she was born. So he never got to meet her, and I was able to find her, and she helped me with this story immensely. And with the photographs you'll see, it's like what Larry has defined as a history harvest. We need documents, we need photographs, and we announce what we need, as I did with Dexter Warren's daughter, and all of a sudden she's sending these fabulous photos, documents, letters home. And so these history harvests are very important, and we're going to have a new research center so we can do more of this type of work and examine photographs, examine documents, and come up with the story. And those stories have so much meaning. I spend my Fridays working in the archives, scanning photographs. I don't get very much work done because I look at these photos, I see these faces staring back at me, I see how people lived. The people staring back at me are alive again in my imagination. And there's a story with every one. And our research center is going to find a lot of those stories. And when we saw this display in our museum of the Gold Star families, we just picked one name, Dexter Warren. We went to our online catalog and our Past Perfect database to see what we had on him, and there was nothing at all. So our lead archivist, Sherry Dundon, built a family tree, and then we began to dig until the blue clams squirted, and we began to get information, and we found the surviving daughter. And with the surviving daughter's help, we were able to create this story of this young World War II navigator that didn't make it back home. Dexter Holt Warren. He was born in 1922 in Illinois. He graduated from Benzie High School, the class of 1940. Then he went to work for car ferries in the summer and in the fall and winter and spring. He was at the University of Cincinnati to study engineering. While he was at a summer internship in Chicago, he crossed paths with a young man named Philip Lawrence. Lawrence was in law school at the University of Chicago. And Dexter, a fraternity brother from the University of Cincinnati, was staying at Lawrence's fraternity house while he was doing his summer internship. And Lawrence went home one night to where his parents lived and his sister. And he told his sister, Mary, I met a really nice young man you would like to meet. And eventually they did marry. And we were able to get this nice picture of Dexter from the Benzonia High School yearbook. That's the only picture we had. And we had an image of where he went to school. And now we begin the history harvest. And we got this picture of Dexter in his uniform from his daughter, Crystal Smith. And now that's preserved. It's in our archives, and researchers, historians, 100 years from now will be able to access this information. Crystal gave us photos, ephemera, and an oral history. We got a diploma showing his training as a navigator. We got a picture of his training crew down in Dalhart, Texas, where he learned to navigate a B-17 Flying Fortress. And there's a picture of Dexter. And all we had was a plaque with a bunch of names and a few gold stars and a name, Dexter Warren. Now we're getting a story. At the end of 1942, Warren finished his first 2 years of studying engineering at the University of Cincinnati. And he went back to help his dad work at the Hilltop Orchard on Warren Road during the summer of 42. Mary came and worked there too. His dad decided he'd better send Warren to the other side of the state so he would keep them apart and not see the two teenagers that were love-struck rush into things too quickly. But Mary came back the next summer, and they fell in love, and then they planned to get married. We didn't have these pictures of the Hilltop Orchard on Warren Road. And then the daughter, Dexter Warren's daughter, provided these snapshots. And these are really the only things that really remain of Dexter. And you can see they were taken just quickly. Some of them are blurry. On the right, you can see Dexter and his wife, Mary, getting married. Here's a wedding snapshot of Dexter and Mary Warren. The maid of honor on the right we don't know who she is. And we believe this was in Chicago. And you can see it was a quick wedding. There wasn't a wedding photographer. Warren's in his uniform. The man on the left is Lawrence, the sister of the brother of Mary that got the two of them together. Then Dexter Warren left Chicago, left his bride, his new bride, and he went to England, where he was stationed at Grafton Underwood Army Air Force Station. And he continued his training. He was given his ID, 5'9", 137 pounds, not a real big person. And we got this from his surviving daughter that he never got to meet. And now we can find some meaning in some of this. We can understand what it was like over there. Warren sent letters to his wife, Mary, almost every day while they were separated. He took great care in his letters to comment on each monthly anniversary of their marriage. In one letter, he wrote to her and said, "Sherman was right. War is hell." On January 29th, 1943, he wrote, after censoring, he was a censor for a while until he got assigned to his plane. He censored enlisted men's email. "It occurs to me that a great many of the men in this army are entirely non-self-sufficient. It appears that about the only thing they live for is the mail they receive. Almost every one of them cries because he does not get mail or keeps talking about the mail he did get. Faithfully forever, Dex. On March 3rd, he wrote, Mary, my first mission over enemy territory is now history, and I had an experience. Burst of flak hit engine number 4 that I hope never to have again. I was one scared navigator all the time. 4 days later, an unhappy Lieutenant Warren wrote to Mary, we learned today that we will have to go at least 30 missions and maybe more before we get a chance to go back home. That was a really deadly business, being in those flying fortresses. A few days later, he writes, Mary darling, you know, it's a horrible feeling to know that people are shooting at you and trying to kill you. I am always sure that every burst of flak I see is aimed directly at me, but thank God they have always missed me. You surely do feel helpless, that stuff bursting around you. He sent this letter a few days later to his family. My precious family, all I can say is thank God for the fighter pilots. If it were not for our little friends, we would either not be doing the job we are today or would not be coming back from the flights. It is probably a little of each. Those little friends have a hell of a job too. Our little friends watch over us like guardian angels on every mission we fly. They drift around us and look so cocky and oh, so comforting. He's talking about the little airplanes, little fighter pilots that are escorting the B-17 bombers. He writes again, Mary darling, we are awakened at a certain time before takeoff. Eat, brief, draw courses, get equipment ready, and take off. When we get back, we go to S2 intelligence briefing. We always have a stiff dose of scotch first, and then sandwiches and coffee. Every time we fly, we get a candy bar. See, these letters are priceless, and they didn't exist until Mary went through a dusty old box, pulled them out, sent them to us. We've scanned them. They're now in our archives forever. And scholars and historians like Andy Bolander could come along at a later date and really dig and find these materials. This is sad. 4 days before he was killed in action, Warren wrote to Mary, Happy Easter, darling. My Easter was not so happy. I did not even have a chance to go to church. Now I am worn out and have time for just a note. Darling, I love you so much, very much. Faithfully forever, Dex. He flew 14 missions. This was his first combat mission. He was navigator for the Lady Drew. Then the second combat mission on Porky's Pig in the 6th and the 11th combat mission. He flew on that. And there's Porky's Pig. And we found his navigation, one of his navigational charts. And if you see the red line, that is their flight plan, and the green line is their flight that they actually followed because of either enemy aircraft or bad weather. And the target was aircraft assembly plant in Germany. And then on his 3rd, 4th, 8th, 9th, 10th, and 13th combat missions, the Merseydotes, and they spelled it funny, but that's how they spelled it. And then on his 5th combat mission, which was aborted, he was on the Section 8 aircraft. The air crew would always like to give a name to their aircraft. He flew for the 7th combat mission on the Kentucky Colonel. And a lot of those B-17s didn't make it back. They were shot to pieces in the air. This one did make it back, but it had heavy damage. Some of the crew members died on the Kentucky Colonel. And on the 12th mission, he was on the Bone. The 14th mission, his last mission, the plane is brand new. It's so new, it's not even named yet. It doesn't have a single name on it. And it goes into service on the 9th of April, 44, and it takes off on the 13th for a mission to bomb a ball bearing plant in Schweinfurt, Germany. He took off at 9:41 a.m. and with less than 10 minutes away from the target, the Germans launched an attack. A wave of 15 long-nosed FW-190s made an attack head-on, reaching speeds over 500 miles per hour. They came in 3 and 4 abreast and rolled over, inverted, upside down while firing. Then more FW-190s and Messerschmitt fighters broke through the clouds and attacked. Warren likely clutched the navigational chart, sweat dripping down his face as he tried to maintain focus while machine gun bursts from Luftwaffe fighter planes cracked his world apart. He must have thought about many things, but one thing was for sure. He was a long way from home, Beulah and Crystal Lake, Michigan, and the thought of the person he loved most, his wife, Mary. A burst of enemy fire blew holes in Warren's bomber. It shot up the wings and the fuselage. Warren felt the heat of the enemy bullets whizzing past. Another burst of enemy fire ripped through the fuselage and struck Warren in the face and the neck. Both wings of Warren's beleaguered bomber began to burn. An explosion ripped through the aircraft. The plane was out of control. Warren's bomber went into a flat turn to the left and then into a steep dive. It started losing altitude and finally spiraled down in flames, with thick black smoke pouring out. The enemy attack only lasted 3 minutes, but it had been fierce. As the plane plummeted earthward, apparently the pilot gave the order to abandon the plane. The pilot glanced at the injured navigator, Dexter Warren. There must have been fright in Warren's eyes. It is likely in that instant that he thought of Mary and his unborn child. The pilot knew that Warren's worst fear was going down in a burning plane. Warren had always asked his fellow crew members to make sure he did not die that way. The pilot lunged toward Warren, checked the parachute strapped to the navigator's back, and without hesitation, shoved Warren through the open bomb doors. The navigator fell into the void. The merciless winds whipped at his battered frame as he fell through the sky. It is possible that seconds later, Warren's parachute deployed with a forceful snap, arresting his skyfall. Below, his plane continued its descent, a fiery comet plummeting towards destruction. The passing seconds ushered Warren into a fiery hell. Warren's plane was shot down with 8 other B-17s on the mission to Schweinfurt. Dexter Warren did not make it. And this then becomes a really difficult trial for his wife, Mary, back here in Beulah. The next day, that same day, she gets a telegram saying he's missing in action. And she believes that. 7 months later, she gets another telegram saying that he's a prisoner of war. And she still has hope that her husband is coming home. And then 18 months later, she gets this telegram that he was killed in action. And again, the museum now has possession of these documents that would otherwise be lost to history. Dexter's body was found by the Germans a couple of days after his plane was shot down, and he was interred in a German cemetery. Later, he was moved to an American military cemetery after the war, the Lorraine American cemetery at Saint Boyd, Saint of Old, France. So Warren's plane crashed over Germany April 13th, 1944, the year after he got married. He made the ultimate sacrifice and died at a shockingly youthful age of 22. 3 months after Warren was killed in action, Mary gave birth to Crystal Jean Warren on July 9th, 1944. Warren never saw his daughter. So that concludes the first part of our talk, and we're making really good time. And we're going to go to the next young man who was in the Pacific Theater of War. And this started a little bit differently. We had the photos, and the photos were in terrible condition. The chemicals were eating the paper up. The images were degrading. People had put tape on them. They were a mess, but we had the pictures. So we were able to work with those pictures and come up with a story. And I was also able to do an oral history with the son of Russell Reed Linsenmeyer, and he went by Reed. Reed was born in Kalamazoo, Michigan in 1922. He was a classmate of Dexter Warren and graduated the same year Warren did in 1940 at the Benzonia High School. He went to MSU and studied journalism, and in the summer he worked on a car ferry. While he was in high school, he also worked with his dad here in Beulah as a plumber and a mason. He enlisted in the Army in 1942, and he was discharged to Tinian Island. We noticed that on some of the photographs, and in the archives, we thought, we've heard of that name before. And we looked that name up, Tinian Island, and it's got quite a story. So there's Reed's high school photo from Benzonia, and there's one of the car ferries that he worked on, and an enlistment picture of him. And there he is at home, sporting his uniform. He's at home, ready to go to Tinian. And here's one of those damaged pictures. He's in the backyard. Another picture of him. And some of us might not know where Tinian is. The red arrow points to Japan, and there is Tinian with the black arrow. Tinian Island had a really small spot in the Pacific Ocean, and Japan had developed it into a sugar plantation and sugar refining plant with 3 runways. And as the war continued, they fortified it with troops. Next came the Battle of Tinian, and that was a very nasty battle from July 24th to August 1, 1944. Out of 8,500 Japanese soldiers stationed there, only 313 survived. 4,000 civilians that were working in those sugarcane fields lost their lives. A lot of them jumped off cliffs, the civilians, or detonated grenades they were holding because they were told the American soldiers would murder them. So it was a viciously fought battle, and a lot of lives were lost by the Americans. And there's a view of Tinian Island. The streets were laid out like Manhattan with Manhattan street names, and they put gun emplacements, supply depots, and runways. And what's so amazing about what we received with these photos is the stories that Linsenmeyer documents on Tinian. He captured the day-to-day activities on Tinian through his photographs showcasing life in various locations on the island. These photos have become an important historical record, capturing the essence of this era on the island. The archivists at our museum have diligently made scans of each photo to protect these important photographs. While most of them are damaged, we have a photo editor who carefully restores some of the damaged photos, bringing them back to life. The photo on the left, you can see how damaged that is. There's pieces of it missing on the right, there's tape on the bottom, and you can see on the right how our photo restoration process improves these images. And we're doing this with most of our damaged photos. Here's an example of an extremely degraded photo taped on the side. It's got moss growing on it, bacteria, foxing, anything that could go wrong with the photo. It's happened to the one on the left. And our photo editor did improve it quite a bit. On that third building, you can now see the little porch and the laundry hanging on the side. In addition to the photographs, we received paper documents from Linsenmeyer's family. There was a Camp Churro, where they confined the Korean and Japanese civilians that had worked in the sugarcane fields. And the Marines would go around trying to find the surviving civilians, and this little girl is being cleaned up and bathed, and then she's sent to Camp Churro. And a little boy, a little child getting some candy from a Marine. And there's a photograph of Camp Churro where they had the civilians. And there's a Linsenmeyer photo that was badly damaged. There's another interesting connection that Benzie County has to the school, or Camp Churro and Tinian Island, and that is the school that was established there by Lieutenant Telfer Mook, a Navy Japanese language officer and graduate of the Japanese language school at the University of Colorado. He got the Japanese teachers that were interned in the camp and found old Japanese textbooks and built a school for the children with Quonset huts, old benches, and he used blackboards built from airfield materials and packing materials. And that school, through his efforts, cared for over 3,000 children. Several children who attended the school went on to become doctors, lawyers, civil servants, and middle-class professionals. Telfer received a special citation from Japan. He grew his fingernails out for weeks and weeks, so he would be a part of the ceremony and blend in with what was going on. He considered it as part of his duties in the Army to care for these children. His work was well beyond the call of duty. He stayed in touch with many of the children throughout his life and retired to Benzie County. He died in 2008 in Benzie County. In 1946, the civilians were returned to their homeland. Reed Linsenmeyer got a really cool picture of an archaeological feature. There was human habitation dating back to prehistoric times on the island, the Chamorro people. And he got a picture of two of his buddies sitting by one of those features. And here's some repeat photography to show you what it looks like today at just a little bit different angle, but it's still there. And another picture of some of the ruins on Tinian Island. Reed was first an MP assigned to neutralize Japanese snipers. It was a very dangerous job. He had to go through the island trying to find enemy soldiers that were dug in, hiding behind rocks. It was very deadly. He lost a lot of his friends. According to his son, he didn't talk about his service on Tinian hardly at all. And these are all Linsenmeyer photos. And we get a really good glimpse, there's Reed, of life on Tinian from the soldier's viewpoint. There's Reed in the background. You can see the shadow of somebody taking his picture. The company, he was reassigned from sniper duty. A company commander found that Reed could type 60 to 80 words a minute. He became the company clerk typist and no longer hunted Japanese snipers. He was a professional pianist and was fast with his fingers. That's why he could type like that. He had learned to play the piano from his grandmother. And here are some of those interesting views of what it was like on Tinian Island. All now part of the archive here at the Benzie Area Historical Society's museum. Some degraded, some not so degraded, but all have been restored. I don't think I'd want to eat that stew made in that pot. This picture is really bad shape, so we didn't try to restore it. Just everyday life, and you notice they're young men, all real young. Some of them got shot by snipers. It was really hot there, bugs everywhere, crawling in and out of their tents, reptiles, snakes. Humidity, heat. There's a picture of Reed. There's Reed in front of a B-29. Reed hanging out in a, looks like some kind of a tank. And from the Tinian, they did the bombing of Tokyo. And the night of March 9th and 10th was the single most destructive bombing raid in human history. It was known as Operation Meeting House, and it destroyed 16 square miles of central Tokyo. They did more damage on the bombing of Tokyo than the 2 atomic bombs dropped on Japan. Sometimes the B-29s didn't fare too well, and they would crash on Tinian Island. This was such a busy airport. It was the most busiest airfield in the world that they couldn't mess around, and they had bulldozers just move the damaged B-29s off so they could keep the planes coming and going. And there's a picture Reed took of all of the B-29s, another one of his pictures. And Tinian is known also as the Atomic Bomb Island. Tinian was the last stage of the Manhattan Project, where 2 bombs were dropped on Nagasaki and Hiroshima, and they were dropped from the North Field by the Enola Gay. There were 6 planes that day. The Enola Gay took the bombs. The great artiste took scientific measurements. The plane Necessary Evil took photographs, and then there were 3 others to act as weather scouts. And there's the pilot, Paul Tibbets, in the center, smoking a pipe. And there's a view of the 2 bombs. Okay, have a guest who is going to read a letter to his mother. It's Reed Linsenmeyer sending this letter to his mother. And Jane Perkis, thank you. So, go ahead.
Oh, yeah, I can be loud, but yeah. Um, Reed sent this letter to his mother 2 months after the bombs had been dropped. The letter is dated October 2nd, 1945. Dear Mother. By the way, speaking of flying, I had an experience yesterday for which some guys would have given their eye teeth. I flew over Japan for almost 4 hours. We took off from here at midnight Saturday and arrived over the coast of Japan at about 6 Sunday. We flew over to the airport of the city of Kobe, and from there we flew over nearly every major city in Japan which had been bombed. The reason for this mission was for the purpose of observation and also for a navigation training mission. I never really would have expected to ever be flying over Japan in a B-29, but I certainly did. I'd like to describe a little of what I saw. When we arrived at the coast of Japan, the sun was just beginning to break over the horizon. It was a beautiful sunrise, and I had just awakened. I'd been sleeping during nearly all the trip so far. Someone kicked me in the ribs and told me to wake up and see the sunrise. So I staggered to my feet and stumbled forward to the turret room and looked out of one of the side blisters and the sunrise. I'd been sleeping in the radar room directly back of the turret room, and there weren't any windows in there. I looked out the blister and saw the sun peeking over the horizon, and directly below us was the shoreline. We were just hitting the coast. We must have been up about 5,000 feet, and that was just high enough to clear the high hills and mountains which lie on the east coast of Japan. After we cleared the mountains which lined the coast, we came down to about 1,000 feet so we could see the ground better. Everything of any importance had been totally wiped out. I don't see how the Japanese race survived at all after seeing how their cities were destroyed. I believe we flew over nearly every city which we had bombed. Finally, we decided to go and have a look at what our atomic bombs had done to Japan. So we headed for Hiroshima. What I saw, I never would have believed it if I hadn't seen it. Not only was there no city there just wasn't even any rubble. The atomic bomb must have swept the whole city right into the bay. You couldn't have done a cleaner job with a broom. There was absolutely nothing. You could see the concrete floor of some of the buildings which had been there, but that was all you could see. After circling around over that place a few times, we went over to have a look at Nagasaki. You remember Nagasaki was the second city which we hit with the atomic bomb. When we arrived there, we could see that that town was even harder hit than Hiroshima had been. It was considerably larger before the war, and both had been large cities. It will probably be a great many years before either one of them is a city again. About 10 o'clock, we headed back to Tinian. We had seen just about everything which was possible to see from the air, so we decided we might as well head back. We didn't want to run out of gas and have to land there, even if it was a conquered land. We arrived at Tinian about 4:30 in the afternoon. We had been up for over 16 hours and were mighty glad to get back on the ground. I certainly enjoyed this trip, and I think it was one of the most outstanding experiences of my life. I had a chance to see things which nobody had ever seen while bombing Japan. Well, Mother, I expect to be home either by the latter part of November or early part of December. I hope you have enjoyed this letter. With much love, Son Reed.
Thank you very much.
We have the actual letter at the museum. Reed's son gave us the actual letter. And he brought the letter in when he brought in Reed's uniform. And I said, oh, I'll make a copy of the letter. He said, no, I want the museum to have the original. I have a copy.
This is an interesting document that Reed took a photograph of. It's the American Memorial Shrine that was constructed by the Seabees there on Tinian Island to honor not only the dead Americans, but also the Japanese soldiers. I thought that was quite telling. So we have a quick epilogue. What happened to Reed Linsenmeyer in 1948? He marries the former Vivian Darling. He then, in the early 40s, he's a courier handling classified messages related to the Navy's first nuclear submarine, the Nautilus. Then, after that assignment, he goes back to work for the car ferry on the Wabash, and in the spare time, he's a professional pianist. He was able to commit to memory between 3,000 and 4,000 songs. I have trouble committing 4 songs to memory, and I found that incredible. He changed his name to Lynn in 1967 because he said he was tired of people misspelling his name. He went to work for General Motors and retired from there in 1980 as an industrial engineer, and he died June 4th, 2001 in Alma, Michigan, and he is buried in Cadillac. So the Allied victory at Tinian in August of 1944 marked a significant milestone in the Pacific War, setting the stage for the defeat of Imperial Japan. From this tiny little island, they dropped 2 atomic bombs. However, soldiers like Linsenmeyer often went unnoticed. Linsenmeyer never pursued recognition as a goal. Just like others in his generation, the greatest generation, he answered the call of duty, motivated by patriotism and honor without the desire for fame or glory. His unwavering resolve and tireless dedication defined his days, and his comrades fought relentlessly against a determined enemy. So, thank you very much. And before we go, we have 2 companion guides, one about Dexter Warren, and the other one about Reed Linsenmeyer. You do not want to leave without buying them. They're for sale for a very special price. You can get both for $10. And the companion guides go in a much deeper detail and a deeper story than what I could do in 40 minutes. But it will be the best $10 you'll ever spend, because it's going to support this museum and help us do more scholarly research, help us reach out and have more history harvest, and save for future generations these important documents, these important photos, and most importantly, the stories which have meaning. Don't leave today without getting your copies. Thank you, guys.